If you've been following long-distance running in Canada, chances are you probably know the story of Tristan Woodfine. He was an incredible collegiate runner, finishing runner-up in 2 separate then CIS cross-country championships. After that, he skipped the track glory to head straight for the roads, making his marathon debut in 2015, running a slightly slower than expected 2:27 high in Rotterdam. Taking a few years to refocus and recharge, Tristan moved from his university town of Guelph back home to the Ottawa Valley and continued to take time off of his marathon, sometimes minutes at a time. So when it came to this year's London Marathon, even with its small 2.1 kilometer loop and unprecedented environment, we knew Tristan had a good race in him, but we didn't know how that would manifest itself in a number. Last Sunday, with an Olympic qualifying time within reach, Tristan Woodfine assumed the start position in London, England, and what you're about to hear is that story. My name is Michael Rokas, and you're listening to The Terminal Mile, this week with special guest, Tristan Woodfine. 2:10:51, man, on a cold and rainy day on 2.15 kilometer loops after being paced by Mo Farah. That sounds like a very, very odd thing that most people will not get to experience in their lifetime. Take a look at your World Athletics page right now. Look at your progression from a 2:27 in Rotterdam in 2015, progressing all the way until 2019 with a 2:13:16, jumping ahead to a 2:10:51 that gets you the Olympic standard this past weekend in London. Tristan, do you think you finally have it, man? Do you think you finally have a good read on the event that we call the marathon?
Yeah, I think I've got a decent read on it right now. I think, every time we've gone through a build and a cycle, we've tinkered with the formula, learned some things, tried some new things each build, and we've kind of slowly developed this, personal marathon training philosophy. But I would be hesitant to say I've got it figured out. The marathon definitely has a way of humbling you, and I think it's definitely good to have a healthy fear and respect for the marathon. As we saw Kipchoge, even the greatest all-time marathoner finally succumbed to the marathon, and it finally got his revenge on him. So I would say I'm got a decent handle, but, by no means, a master at it yet.
It's a number 2:10:51 that could mean so much to a lot of people. I mean, that ranks you very high on the all-time Canadian list. It's an Olympic qualifier. But, taking a look at that number and taking a look at the results around you, taking a look at, say, someone like Moen, who has a PB in the 2:05 highs. He ended up running a lot slower. You mentioned Kipchoge didn't quite have his day. It seems like the race was run quite a bit slower than perhaps it could be, and that has a lot to do with the conditions that we talked about. What does 2:10:51 mean to you? I mean, what does that race mean to you at this point?
Yeah, I'm really happy, to have hit that time. I think going into the race, I was really confident I could still hit standard in crappy conditions. But in hindsight, I think I almost underestimated it a little bit. Like the day before, I was still very calm about the whole situation. But I think looking at it after, the conditions were pretty crappy. And I think they definitely had a larger effect than I was giving them credit for going into the race. But, yeah, I mean, it means a lot to still have been able to execute the race at the level I did. We put a lot of work into it these last few years, and there's just been so many people who have helped me so much, get to that start line in a position to, be as fit as I was. So, during the race that, it was a lot for those, all those people. That's what I kind of came back to during those tough those tough sections was just thinking about all the people and all the time and energy and support they put into this dream of mine. So, it was, it's just really grateful and happy to have executed that race for them.
You mentioned it a bit there, but so much of the marathon race is psychological, and I have to think that conditions like what you saw were unlike anything that you've ever seen before. I mean, in Toronto, there's crowds of people who will cheer at different points in the race. Ottawa has pretty good support. Rotterdam has good support. You're going into this place in London where it was you and literally the only people who are also in the race are people who are just as fast as you, maybe a little bit faster. I mean, like, what was that like?
Yeah, it was like, going into the race, it was very different because there's no crowds. We kind of just bussed down there, got into the tent, and each person had their own 3 by 3 meter tented area off within that big giant tent, and you had your own toilet and your porta potty, and you kind of just were there, and then you could go warm up, and there's no crowds, really no other people, and then you kind of just get taken out to the race, to the race course, and again, it's empty, but then I would say that the race itself was a little more similar. I think once the race, the gun goes off, you kind of just zone out everything anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there is more crowd support in the other marathons, but a lot of times you don't even register that while you're racing. So really, for me, the race kind of felt quite similar. You're very just sort of tuned into what's happening. And then again, once you cross the finish line and it's all done, again, it's very different because then there's not really anyone there. You just go back to the tent, and it's kind of just a very subdued atmosphere, compared to your usual bigger city marathon. So, it was kind of a wild and different race, but, it's just grateful to have any opportunity to race, in these times.
So, I mean, like you seem like a person who has a really good head on their shoulders as far as taking on the beast that is the marathon. What was there a point in the race where you looked at your watch, or you looked at your splits and said, okay, I've done this. I've gotten that Olympic standard. I will PB by quite a bit here. Like, when did that moment come in the race?
Just as I rounded the last corner before crossing the finish line. I mean, during the race, there was definitely, we had, coming around on each lap, about 100 meters past the finish line was a giant screen, and it would give you, it said your name, your placing, how many laps you had left, and your projected finish time. So every 2.1K, we had projected finish time, flash up. So you had a pretty good idea of what, how your pacing was going. And I want to say, a lot of the race, it would say anywhere between 210, I think I saw as low as 210.05, upwards to 211. So I always knew we were on pace. But this race was tough. In a lot of previous marathons, I had been able to kind of just mentally check out a bit the first half. You kind of just hop into your pace group and just sort of let the first half kind of just breeze by and try not to think too much. But I found it difficult to do that this race. I mean, I'd maybe chalk it up to the weather conditions, just being a lot tougher than I've ever faced. But I really felt I had to stay mentally engaged the whole race. I could never zone out, and if I kind of zoned out, I felt like I was falling off pace a bit. So it was one of those mental grinds this whole race. So there wasn't a point where I ever thought for sure I'm getting standard, and then experience had taught me, that at the snap of a fingers, your race can start going downhill fast. The marathon is just so unforgiving. and you really have to keep your wits about you. You can't sort of rest in your laurels like at all ever during the race and sort of, feel like you've got it, because things can just spiral down fast. So I think, it wasn't until I rounded that last corner and saw like 2:10:30 with, like 100 meters to go or something, that I was like, all right, it's done. Like, as long as I don't collapse, like, we're good. So, it was literally, the last 100 meters maybe.
So you cross the finish line with that excellent time. You have standard. What's the celebration like? Because I mean, like, that's kind of weird too, no? Like, I mean, like, John Mellor would be just in front of you. He got standard for Great Britain and stuff, but obviously, it sounds like they did a really good job of making sure that everyone was distanced and stuff when they weren't running the race. What was the celebration like after? Like, have you really had a chance yet to just to celebrate what you did in that race?
Yeah, it wasn't really until I got home on. I guess I got home late Monday, so Tuesday was a bit more, some more celebrations. But like right after the race, it was like kind of go back to your tent, and then I had to go to doping control, and then I was hopping on the bus, back to the hotel, back to your room, and then there was a bit of a dinner that night, and then the next morning went home. So it was like. Yeah, and then like at the hotel and stuff, and we all still have to like social distance and stuff. So you know what I mean? There's not really much socializing going on. So it was kind of a weird situation. But and I mean once I got home and yesterday, it kind of was sort of sunk in a little bit more and was able to relax and celebrate a bit and reflect on how. Good it was to have actually executed that race.
So, going into a race like this, it's more than just the 42.2 kilometers. There's a lot of training that went into it. Of course, that, and I have to say your Instagram account is probably one of my favorite ones to follow, just because you lay it out really well, whether it be running a 1.8 kilometer loop that you made at home, convincing your neighbors that maybe it might be a little bit off, or running a new best 10K time in a threshold. What really clicked for you in the training? Was there a point that you can look at where the whole build basically changed and like you knew that you had this thing?
Yeah, I would say it was probably right around that time of that 10K I did on the track. We had sort of set it up as like a bit of a fitness predictor. So we wanted to do it as like a tune-up race, or I guess time trial, like, kind of like 97, 98% effort. We figured we added on the threshold stuff after to just make it a little more marathon specific and a bit more volume. But because I think that was early August, and we started the build in beginning of July, and July was a really tough month, I think, because it was just, I guess you would have known, it was hot, like brutally hot all month, and like no rain, so I remember just like every workout just being such a grind to like being nowhere near the paces I wanted to hit. But again, like it was like always like even early in the morning, it was still already like 20 degrees and humid. So I remember, right around that time, which was 5 weeks out, the weather started finally, like the mornings started being cooler. We hit that like PB'd in that workout. And then after that day, like almost every workout I was like, wow, that was one of the best workouts of my life. And then the next one would be like, wow, that was one of the best workouts of my life. And then that pattern basically continued right through till the race. So, I took a lot of confidence from the fact that I had basically 5 weeks of just workouts that I had just never been able to touch like anywhere close before. So I figured I was definitely on a different level, because I think sometimes you can, pop out one really good workout, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can replicate that on race day, because sometimes you just have those days. But, being able to have done it every workout for 5 weeks, I knew for sure it was, that fitness was there for sure, and I was going to be able to access that on race day.
Okay, let's settle this once and for all. As a non-Ottawa area person, whenever I run in Ottawa in the summer, it just, I don't know, man. It's like the humidity's just something completely different up there. Is this something that's all in my head, or is this a real thing? Like, is there science to back this up, do you think?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's science, but yeah, I always feel like the weather up this way is more extreme than Southern Ontario. Whether it be like the winters, I swear it's always colder, here, and then in the summers it's always hotter. Like, having kind of lived in both, I'm pretty sure that's an accurate statement, but I don't know if that's science or whatnot. But for sure, it's been an observation I've noticed as well.
So let's take a look at that 1.8 kilometer loop. So you ran 40 kilometers around this 1.8 kilometer loop. What was the workout like that day? And what would you say probably the hardest part of trying to pull that off was? And do you think it actually had any effect when it came to running in London?
Yeah, we did. I want to say 4 or 5. Good quality long runs on that loop, anywhere from like 32 to 40K. And yeah, I think that the toughest part is just getting your rhythm. I think if you can get a rhythm and find that right headspace, the laps can go by pretty quick. It's almost actually easier than running like a long loop, because there's something about just going round and round, if you're in that right headspace, that the time can actually go by pretty quick. It's just the tough part comes like when you start getting tired and you start counting laps and you're not in the right headspace, where then the time can reverse and they can start feeling like a lot longer. So I think, running those loops, I guess it's hard to say whether or not they definitely helped in London, but when I raced in London, I didn't really notice the loops or have too much trouble with them. So I'd like to think that by doing that, we prepared well and it helped. But again, it's, hard evidence, hard to say, but I don't know. I think it helped.
Fair enough. Hey, a couple weeks ago, I was talking with Cam Levins, and we were recounting the time that you guys were training in Kenya together. You ran again with Cam this past weekend in London. I'm not sure how much interaction you got with him there, but talk to me a little bit about your time in Kenya training together. What was that like to spend time with a guy who's really a legend in Canadian sport right now?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. He was definitely been, he's one of the best distance runners in Canada. And I learned a lot. He's working with, I think he mentioned this, and when he was talking with you, working with Jim, he saw some of the workouts he was doing, and it was like, man, it kind of makes you think the some of the volume they were putting in at marathon pace kind of stuff. You're like, okay, there's definitely room to grow in that department. He's just a great guy, and super open with what he was doing, and and I think we got even a workout in together, which, kind of together. He really blew me out of the water that day, but it was great to be able to run with him and kind of learn, pick his brain a little bit, and see someone who has had a lot of success at the highest level of the sport, what they do, and how they kind of approach running as a whole.
So, that was you were there February through to mid-March when the whole pandemic thing hit, and you had to move into action pretty quickly, ditch your spring plans and stuff. What was that like? That must have been pretty wild.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, being there when the pandemic hit and stuff. It happened pretty suddenly. I think that was like a lot of people. It was just all of a sudden things started shutting down, and we came home, and it kind of weird to plan training and stuff when you really have no idea what's going on. But we kind of just took it day by day, like a lot of people, and just slowly, kind of process the news and what was going on, and then went from there.
Yeah. So what was that like? You talked about starting your build in July. So from the time that, because you were scheduled to run the London Marathon when it was originally supposed to be slated to run in April, what did you do between, the time that it was canceled and the time that you went home and the start of your build? How did you kind of view that time?
Yeah, we obviously invested a fair bit of time and money into going to London or Kenya, for training and like an altitude boost. So when we got back, we took a week, just sort of short, easy runs, get over the jet lag, and kind of figure out what was actually happening. And by the end of that week, the Olympics had been canceled or postponed, and like everything was basically canceled, and there wasn't really. It was looking like there was not going to be any sort of race anytime soon. So we decided to keep the momentum going, that we had built in Kenya. The big thing we changed was we sort of just threw pace out the window. So we did all of our training by time and effort for April, May, June. We pushed things in training and pushed the volume higher, the intensity a bit higher, and tried to still get really fit, but just in a slightly almost less stressful way, in terms of just not worrying about pace and just getting all this work in. And then once July hit, we sort of reverted back to, what we usually do, which is, have a bit more data on the workouts and paces, specific paces to hit and that sort of thing. So, that was our approach to it, and it seemed to work really well.
Yeah, I'd say, well, hey, you're back in the country now. You are in a mandatory 2-week period of quarantine. How is that going? Have you actually watched the London Marathon races yet?
No, actually, I haven't. I'm not sure if I will or not. I guess we'll see. We'll see if if I feel like I want to or not. But the quarantine's going well. It's it's actually quarantining while on downtime is actually not the worst thing. You're just trying to rest anyways. So just enjoying some free time. That you don't have all those hours training. So
Well, see, I was asking, not because I think you're some sort of narcissist or something, but that race has such a historic weight to it. Just so many factors going into it, whether it be the caliber of the field or the results or, hey, even where you ended up and the people who hit, standard and that sort of stuff. What was that like? You have to kind of block some of the data out of your head, no? The race happening up in front of you and, what Cam's doing and the guys who are around you as well.
Yeah, it's like they had some speakers set up along the mall, I guess they call it there, in front of Buckingham Palace. like all along there. So I do remember sometime in the race, like all of a sudden I would hear like a split being called out, like the broadcasting for the lead group. And like, I remember sometimes it was like, and the last mile for the lead group was like 5 minutes. And I remember being like, what? Like, what the heck is going on at the, like in the lead group? And, and then they'd be like, you'd hear like a 440, and then you're kind of like, so I was vaguely aware that the race up front was like unfolding in sort of a very unique, and different way. So yeah, maybe I should go back and sort of watch that, because it is, kind of crazy, and Kipchoge being beaten for the first time in whatever it is, 9 or 10 marathons now. It's, kind of a, definitely one of those races I would have watched if I wasn't in it. But maybe I should go back and just kind of see how it all unfolded, elsewhere in the race.
Oh, for sure. Hey, now that you've run this standard, I mean, now what? I mean, like we have, almost a year now until the Olympic Games. Hopefully, best case scenario, we're almost a year out. Now what do you do?
That's a good question. I really didn't think a whole lot past London this year. It was kind of like once things got canceled, and then in July when we got to put London on the calendar, it was like, I kind of took it as this might be my only chance to run Olympic standard. Like, there's no guarantees for any other marathon. So it was 100% focused on this race. And now that it's done, I mean, it's tough. Like, usually you could say, oh, I want to do, X race, but there's no guarantee that any of these races are going to happen. So I think we kind of have to just go back to kind of what we did before the London build, which was just, try and just do a lot of work, a little more unstructured, timed, effort-based, just get generally fit, and then once you can put a race on the calendar, then kind of take your training in a more specific direction.
I really liked your last Instagram post, and people can search that out, at Tristan Woodfine. But you thank a lot of people in that post, and I just think it's really neat to show that kind of gratitude to the people who surround you. And I think we can often forget about it's not just one person that gets people to where they're going. If you want to mention some of those people, that's completely fine by me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, it's one thing I don't take for granted is the kind of support and people show, because like running, it's kind of like you do it as an individual, but sometimes it kind of blows me away sometimes how much, I mean, like, obviously my family is really supportive, my fiance and her family are really supportive, and like, that's important. And then there's also like these other people who aren't your family who like just care, so much and show so much support. And it's just like, sometimes blows your mind that like, you're like, wow, like, you know what I mean? Like, if some people really, believe in you and like want to help you, achieve that dream. And like, I think it's a kind of a powerful thing. Like, that's the one thing that really helped me get through the toughest moments in London. I was, trying reflecting on all the things other people had done to help get me in that race as fit as I was, and it was kind of like, I got to just, as crappy as this is right now, like, you got to just grit it out for those people, like, this is for them. Like, you're only here by, the grace and support of other people. So kind of just suck it up and get this done. And, so yeah, I'm definitely grateful for all those people.
Well, I think I speak for a lot of people. I mean, like the texts were going back and forth between all the other people who were watching the race. Was almost a little bit late for work, but hey, man, it's Sunday morning. It's all good. Hey, man, I really appreciate you being on, and it was a really cool moment to see you pull it off, and just the biggest congratulations, and thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, no, thank you, and thanks for having me. That's always nice to chat about running stuff nowadays, because there's not a whole lot of running news to go around.
Huge congratulations to Tristan on his Olympic qualifying time, and big thanks to him for being on the show this week. Really appreciate it. Hey, if you like us, be sure to pass this along to your teammates and subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us out a lot, and it's how we can really keep this thing going. My name is Michael Rokas. You've been listening to The Terminal Mile, and remember, support your local Twilight.